Today's presentation explores egalitarianism and its role in Australian community services. Egalitarianism refers to the belief that all people have equal moral worth and deserve fair access to opportunities. In Australia, this is often described through the idea of a fair go. In community services, this principle guides how practitioners ensure access, dignity, and justice for diverse populations, such as people with disability, migrants, families, and young people. For example, a caseworker in Adelaide supporting a newly arrived refugee family applies egalitarianism by ensuring they receive the same quality of housing, education, and health referrals as long-term residents, rather than treating them as less deserving. Egalitarianism is a political and moral philosophy that emphasizes equality among people. It assumes that every person has equal moral standing, regardless of gender, ethnicity, disability, or class. In community services, this means workers do not judge clients based on background, but on need and rights. For instance, when a social worker supports both an older Australian-born client and a migrant client, egalitarian practice requires the same respect, quality of assessment, and commitment to outcomes for both groups. Australian egalitarianism developed from Enlightenment ideas about human equality and was strengthened through colonial migration policies. Australia promoted itself as a society without rigid class hierarchies like Britain. The idea of the fair go suggests that everyone deserves respect and opportunity. In practice, community services reflect this by offering universal access programs such as Medicare, NDIS, and public housing, aiming to reduce class-based disadvantage. The first core claim of egalitarianism is equal moral standing. Every person has inherent dignity. In community services, this means workers avoid moral judgment. For example, when supporting people experiencing homelessness in Sydney, practitioners treat clients as citizens with rights, not as failures. This approach builds trust and encourages engagement in services such as housing support and mental health programs. Egalitarianism argues that unequal treatment based on gender, race, disability, or migration status is unjust. Australian community services apply this through anti-discrimination laws and inclusive practice. For example, an employment support program in Melbourne must not exclude women carers or people with disability from training. Instead, services adapt schedules and environments to ensure participation is fair and realistic. The third claim involves redistribution. When large inequalities exist, society has a responsibility to reduce them. In Australia, this is seen in programs like the NDIS or Youth Allowance. In community work, a practitioner might prioritize intensive case management for young people leaving out-of-home care, recognizing they face greater barriers than peers from stable families. Egalitarianism becomes practical through four principles: equality of opportunity, social justice, human rights, and shared responsibility. For example, community centers in South Australia provide free legal clinics and digital literacy programs so low-income residents can access services and employment pathways that might otherwise be closed to them. Community service workers apply egalitarianism by ensuring access regardless of background, reducing bias through training, and involving clients in service design. For instance, in multicultural aged care services, staff consult families about cultural food, language, and rituals so that older people receive care that respects both equality and diversity. Equality does not mean everyone gets the same service. It means people get what they need to achieve similar life chances.
In disability services in Melbourne, two clients may both receive NDIS funding, but one might need assistive technology while another needs social participation programs. Egalitarianism supports personalized planning rather than uniform solutions. A Melbourne disability provider demonstrates egalitarianism by prioritizing inclusive access and person-centered practice. Workers focus on client goals, such as employment or social connection, rather than limitations. For example, supporting a client with intellectual disability into supported employment promotes dignity and equal participation in society.
A youth shelter in Sydney applies egalitarianism by treating homeless young people with equal dignity. Rather than labeling them as troublemakers, staff provide mentoring, education pathways, and housing referrals. This supports young people to rebuild independence and engage with society as equal citizens. Egalitarianism faces challenges. Resources are limited, and equal distribution may ignore different levels of need. For example, if a community center divides funding equally across clients, people with complex trauma may receive insufficient support. Practitioners must balance fairness with responsiveness to individual circumstances. Equal access alone cannot fix structural problems such as housing shortages or insecure employment. Migrants with disability may also face gaps in protection. For example, a temporary visa holder experiencing family violence may not qualify for income support, limiting the practical impact of egalitarian ideals in service delivery. For practitioners, egalitarianism requires reflection and advocacy. Workers not only provide services, but also challenge unfair systems. For example, a community worker in Adelaide may advocate for policy change when clients repeatedly face rental discrimination, moving beyond individual support to social justice action. In conclusion, egalitarianism is central to Australian community services. It promotes dignity, fair opportunity, and social justice. However, it must be applied critically, recognizing diversity, structural barriers, and citizenship limits. By combining person-centered practice with advocacy, community service workers can help ensure the Australian ideal of a fair go becomes a lived reality for all groups.